Well, hello, it's really good to see you this week. How are you, Helen? You had a good week?
I have had a really good week. In fact, I wanted to tell you something I found out because I just think it's so interesting and I'm really excited. I've discovered that the moon is made out of cheese. Isn't that cool? I mean, cheese is one of my favorite things anyway, but the moon is made out of it. And I found all this stuff on the internet and it is so interesting. And yeah, who knew? Who knew?
Are you sure? Where have you found out this information?
Well, on the internet, you see, I watched this video from this person who was talking about how the moon was made from cheese, and then they did a link to a website. I think the website was something like imakestuff.up.com, and I went into the website and it was all this information, and they'd spoken to like scientists and astronauts and like people from NASA, proper people, and they all were like, so I was like, wow, how did we not know this? Why is it not on the news that the moon's made of cheese?
Don't you think the name of the website might have given it away? I mean, I know it would be really exciting and really good if the moon was made from cheese, but I think you better check your websites out. Perhaps go to something more official than the one you said.
Yeah, I mean, now you're saying it, like, they were quite vague with stuff. They were just like scientists. They didn't really interview anyone specifically. And yeah, I don't even think, no one I would ever heard of, or any kind of organization who seemed a bit
kind
of trustworthy was involved. Do we think maybe they made it up?
I think they might have made it up, as that's what they're called.
Okay.
I think you really ought to check somebody more responsible to find out about it. You need to be careful who you're listening to,
Okay.
And you know what? That's part of our story today, about listening. And you might have heard me say that we were talking about Herod next week, but I got that wrong. Sorry about that. We're talking about Rehoboam. We did mention him last week in the story when Helen talked about David, and he's one of his grandsons.
Sons, I think. Sons,
right. And he split the country up, so that wasn't very good, but we'll hear about that in the story. Now, the story this week, as we said, is about Rehoboam. We weren't sure who he was, but he is, I've looked it up in the Bible, good source to go to. I've looked it up, and he was Solomon's son, and he was David's grandson. Now, David and Solomon had ruled over Israel. There's a picture, that's a map of Israel, and all the different tribes of Israel. And Rehoboam lived in Judah, around about here. Now, the people of Israel, Solomon wasn't particularly bad, but he did do some not good things. And he didn't treat these people very well. So they came to Rehoboam when he became king and said, can you treat us a bit better than your dad did? He beat us and, we didn't like that. So we'd come to you and ask you if you could help us. So he said, well, go away for 3 days and I will ask my advisors. So he went to his father's advisors, old wise men, and they said, well, yeah, it probably would be better if you didn't, just be nice to them, help them, and they'll help you. And he thought about this and he listened to them. And then he went away and he talked to the men that he'd grown up with, who weren't so experienced. And they said, no, if you want to get more work out of them, beat them even harder. Be really hard on them and then they'll work harder for you. So he listened to them. And then 3 days later, these people came back. And Rehoboam said to them, no, if you don't work hard, I'll beat you even more. My dad might have beat you with a whip, but I'm going to beat you with scorpions. Ooh. So, well, they didn't like that, did they? So they decided, we don't have to stay here and put up with you. We can go back to our homeland, because they probably came from some of these other tribes up here. So anyway, they went off and left him. So poor Rehoboam had no one. And they went back up north, and they found the person they wanted to be king had come back from Egypt. So Jehoram became their king. Now, because Rehoboam didn't listen and he'd done the wrong thing, they broke off. So instead of being all Israel together, there was a king here and a king here. And you know what happened? We did mention it last week. It became that the two parts of the kingdom were torn in half. And that was the end of Israel as they knew it.
Today's memory verse is from Proverbs 2 verse 9 and says, "Then you will understand what is right, just and fair, and you will find the right way to go." So today we met a guy, didn't we? We met David's grandson, Rehoboam, who took some advice and actually turned out to be not very good advice, was it? And it had consequences not just for him, but actually for the whole of Israel. So he had some problems with his workers, didn't he? And he went to one group of people for advice, and actually they gave him some good advice. But then he went to another group of people and they didn't give him very good advice, but he decided to listen to them. And in the end, the bad advice he'd listened to actually cost him his workers. They decided, well, they were going to up and leave if he wasn't going to treat them very well. And actually in the long term, not only did that have a consequences kind of immediately, but the whole of Israel ended up splitting, and it remained that way for a very long time. Now, we have lots of different voices in our lives, don't us? We can listen to lots of different things, and sometimes it can be confusing to know who is trustworthy and who isn't. Now, at the beginning, me and Karen were talking, weren't we? And I was rather excited because I thought I had discovered that the moon was made of cheese, and I had discovered this stuff, and I'd gone online, and all these people that said they were experts, I had believed them. But as I was telling Karen, little by little, she went through all my points, didn't she? And she was like, are you really sure that they were proper people? Are you really sure that the website you were looking at was like trustworthy? And actually, as I started thinking about it, I realised actually it probably wasn't. That actually probably the stuff that I had been listening to and believing was actually probably just made up, and someone had just decided to put it on the internet because they can. Now, that was a bit of a silly story, the moon being made of cheese, but in real life, we can have lots of different voices. We can go on the internet and we can see so many things telling us that we should do this about a situation and this about a situation. You know, you can go online and kind of maybe Google your problem, and then you have all this advice that tells you should do this and you should do this and you should do that. And it can be so confusing because some of that advice might be good, but some of that advice will not be good at all. Now, a bit like Rehoboam, he went to two groups of people for some advice, didn't he? And one group was really good and gave him some good advice, but the other group gave him awful advice. So what we need to do is we need to be a bit careful to who we listen to. Now, God is someone that we can listen to and we can trust. We can listen to God whilst praying to him. We can listen to him through his word. We can listen to him through other people. But actually, God's also put people in our lives that we can listen to and we can trust, like our family members, friends, people at our church, people at our schools, you know, teachers, people who we trust to help us make good decisions. So if you guys ever have any problems, make sure that not only are you praying to God about it, but that you're going to good, trustworthy people who will give you good advice.
Well, it's prayer time now. Our tree's getting very full of prayers, so if you can keep sending your prayers in, that would be really good. Just email them to me. But we're going to say our prayer now today, so let us pray. Help us to listen and to make the right decisions. Amen. I'm going to stick that up. There we go.
Right, guys, wow, we hope you enjoyed today's session and learned a little bit more how important it is for us to listen to the right people and to God in our lives. So next week, two people we are looking at next week, two baddies of the Bible. We are looking at the story of Ahab and Jezebel. So we hope you all have a really good week, and we will see you next week.
That'd be good. Bye.